In 1905, Navajo riders crossed the desert of Tessacod Canyon. The land, worn out, barely responds, but the column moves on in silence, alert to signs along the trail. The sound of hooves cuts the air and sets the rhythm of the march. Amid dust and heat, they keep their bearing, move forward together, protect the people, and clear the way for what's to come. In 1905 in New Mexico, the camera captures Kohit Songwi, a young Tewa in front of a setting that spans time. The frame isn't just a portrait, it's a slice of life and collective memory. Dressed for ritual, she links grandparents and grandchildren, past and now, reminding us that cultural heritage stands on repeated gestures and passed down voices. In the 1910s, a photo shows a Taos Pueblo family in New Mexico, a simple moment that reveals habits, bonds, and ways of living. The clothing signals belonging and the passing of knowledge between generations. It's a portrait of continuity, memory, and future. Like the content? Subscribe to the channel to follow more visual stories. In 1890, a photograph shows Tsu, known as Mrs. Minnie, in the Laguna Pueblo community in New Mexico. The framing reveals her attentive presence, signs of daily life, and tradition holding on while the landscape changes. Looking at the image, we're invited to pick up that memory and recognize the culture that sustained generations in the desert. In 1899, a photograph captured a man of the Pueblo nation named Canoe. The portrait works as a bridge across time. It lets us see customs that crossed the turn of the century. Wearing ceremonial dress, he stands firm, a sign of a way of life passed through generations. There, the memory of the collective takes shape and invites us to look beyond the moment. The photograph invites a leap through time. Before it, a young woman from a native people of North America recorded in the 19th century. Her gaze, clothing, and surroundings suggest routines, beliefs, and collective bonds. As a trace and a witness, the image points to paths for understanding how these societies lived and knew themselves. Two young Apache women in Arizona weave side by side. Dry fibers move firmly through their fingers as the baskets take shape, spiral by spiral. The back and forth of the motion seems to call the elders. In each weave there is memory, livelihood, and a tie to the land, keeping a practice passed down quietly from generation to generation, day after day. In Genoa, Nebraska, the portrait of a Pawnee woman shows more than a face. It reveals her people's presence in that place and hints at paths of movement and belonging. In the light of her eyes and her adornments, the link to tradition comes through, showing how collective memory crosses spaces and keeps shaping identities there. An Apache warrior rests. Beside him, a bow and arrows. The stillness isn't just a pause. It's a witness to memory, knowledge, and protection. What he carries with his body outlines his identity and his way of being. In that attentive quiet, the Apache people's connection to their practices of war vibrates, foundations of a story that upholds the present and projects tomorrow. A young Kiowa woman appears in traditional dress. What she wears isn't just fabric, it's memory in motion. From patterns to beads, every detail carries meanings, stories, and ancestors' names. In this way, her body connects now an origin, upholds community values, and keeps alive narratives that cross time, passed from hand to hand. In 1916, at the Rosebud Reservation, Black Bull emerged. His voice crossed fences and called the Sioux people to action. With firm decisions and eyes forward, he became a reference and a guide. Around him, life at Rosebud gained order and purpose. As time moved on, what he planted kept sounding far, carrying his name beyond the prairies and the stories told. At the turn of the 19th century, around 1891, the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota saw the Sioux leadership of Two Strike, Crow Dog, and High Hawk gain strength. Their choices shaped daily life, guided political disputes, and stitched bridges between tradition and strategies to face pressure around the reservation. Enjoyed the story? Subscribe to the channel. In the early 20th century, across the lands that are now Arizona and California, 3 young Kemahuevi came of age to the rhythm of the desert and the rivers. Day after day, they guided trails, watched the seasons, hunted, and gathered. By repeating ancient gestures, they kept open the passage between the community and the land, preserving the memory that shaped who they were. Early 20th century, across the wide lands of Alberta, two men of the Blackfoot Nation appear in silence, alert, like those who keep watch over old stories. Between plains and big sky, their presence affirms what came before. They were there before the borders. In the way they look and stand, each gesture calls up memory, territory, and continuity. Around 1882, on the Great Plains of North America, an Arapaho mother poses with her son. The scene shows everyday life and the bonds of a people who have lived in the region for generations. William Alma frames the moment with precision and invites us to notice the gestures, objects, and quiet that shape life in that land. In 1875, four Pawnee brothers, remembered for music, stood before the camera of William Henry Jackson. The photographer was recording the daily life and history of indigenous peoples. In the photo, there isn't just a pose, there's a voice. The portrait crosses time and affirms presence, memory, and culture, a silent meeting that still calls us to listen. In a photograph from the early 20th century, a young indigenous mother holds her child close to her chest. Her gaze, straight at the camera, invites the viewer into the scene. The traditional clothing shows the techniques and symbols of her people. Between cloth, hands, and quiet, the image links care and shared memory, suggesting how identity crosses time and goes from mother to child. In the 1920s in Montana, Stump Horn of the Cheyenne Nation was photographed holding a rifle tied to the Battle of Little Bighorn. The photo captures a link between times. In the weapon, the memory of a clash. In his face, the responsibility to keep what he inherited alive. Past and present touch and say who he is and what his people still defend. In the 1920s, Joe Lamoose, the chief known as Flathead, became the tribe's point of convergence. He led councils, stitched agreements, and when tension arose, he listened before deciding. By protecting the land and the way of life, he made leadership an everyday job, a steady presence that day after day kept the community united. In 1911, among the Piegan, the village gathered around a man called the Pledger. He led rituals, collected accounts, and stitched generations together. By carrying the words of the ancestors to the young, he made the past a constant presence. In this way, collective memory stayed lit, and ordered traditions upheld the people's identity. Early 20th century, in the Arizona desert, a Hopi mother and daughter moved to the village's rhythm. At dawn, they prepare the earth. In the afternoon, they weave. At night, the fire gathers voices and memories. Between rituals and harvests, each gesture holds knowledge that crosses generations and, step by step, defines how they see the world and move through it with steadiness. Around 1905, near the Colville Reservation in Washington, a quiet instant unfolds. A baby beside a young woman. Around them, open land leads trails, rivers run, the wind murmurs. In that brief meeting, past and tomorrow touch. There, the sense of home and bond is born, reminding us that every childhood carries a community's story. In the early 20th century, Chief Joseph became a leading voice among the Nez Perce. He led the defense of their lands and ancestral culture. In 1903, he stayed at the front, seeking ways to ensure collective survival and protect traditions in the face of settler expansion and U.S. government policies. Enjoyed the content? Subscribe to the channel. Chief Pipichis of the Little Bone Reserve, connected to the Sakime First Nation near Grenfell, Canada, became a leading voice among the Cree. Starting in 1884, he guided his people in a decisive time, between alliances, clashes, and negotiations with European settlers, when choices traced the future of the lands and local peoples. Around 1902, Geronimo, leader of the Chiricahua Apache, stood out in records and beyond them. He wasn't just mentioned, his decisions revealed tensions in the Southwest and sparked new readings about Native peoples. Following his path shows a legacy that crosses generations. It isn't distant past, but a reference for understanding conflicts, alliances, and the voice that endures. In 1915, in the American Southwest, a Navajo woman bent down at the stream to fetch water. The act, everyday and vital, kept the household standing and strengthened community ties. In that daily scene, memory and resistance met, showing how indigenous peoples preserved life and dignity under growing pressures without losing their sense of belonging. Around 1900, Carl Wernz photographed a young Hopi woman in Novi, Arizona. The close portrait opens a window onto a daily life that crosses generations. Ritual clothing, a steady gaze, and stone walls bring together different times and reveal how persistently the Hopi have kept their ways and passed on their memory to this day. In 1905, a portrait shows Ute Chief Buckskin Charlie raising a peace medal. Granted by the U.S. government, it evokes a period of negotiations between indigenous leaders and federal authorities. It isn't mere adornment. It marks a turning point in relations between native peoples and the state, when conversation and conflict advance together. A young Chiricahua Apache woman appears in the clothing of her people. The fabrics trace stories, and the adornments hold different meanings. It isn't just clothing, it's memory in motion, identity, and right, a bridge to the ancestors. By putting on each piece, she carries her people with her and in her own body affirms the continuity of tradition. In 1885, in the White Mountain lands, the Apache scout Penaltish, called Zok, earned respect by guiding those who crossed the region. He moved in silence along dry trails, read almost invisible marks, and escorted travelers safely. Among dunes and rocks, his reading of the path upheld the community that trusted him.
Around 1900, a photograph captured an Oglala woman. The portrait, beyond fixing her face, preserves traces of daily life and the practices of this people from the U.S. plains. Today, the image works as a bridge to the past, a witness to that person's life and the time around her, and it still sparks questions about her story. Every photo holds a storyline. Here we see a woman from the Northern Cheyenne Nation, photographed in the late 1920s or after. Standing, she holds a cane and wears an embroidered scarf around her neck. The way she looks at the camera suggests hidden memories. Steps taken, encounters, nights by the fire, lived over decades. Before we continue, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube understands this content matters and shares it with more people. Of Shoshone origin, the Comanche left the Rocky Mountains at the start of the 18th century. The crossing opened the way to the Great Plains, where they controlled routes and territories. There, they established a presence in Texas, becoming one of the most influential indigenous nations in the region. Coming from the north, they adapted to the horse and to a nomadic life. In 1901, at the Fort Hall Reservation in Pocatello, Idaho, a portrait captured a northern Shoshone family. The image reveals faces and postures that tell a bit about the daily life and identity of this people, fixing in a single instant the presence of a community that resisted and reinvented itself in that territory. In the 1880s, Spotted Tail, Singte Gleska, rose to prominence among the Brule Lakota. Amid deep changes, he acted as a bridge between traditions and outside pressures, working out ways to protect his people. His leadership, steady and strategic, marked a decisive chapter in indigenous history. In the 17th century, explorers started calling them Pima, though they knew themselves as Akamelo Odom, the river people. They live in the Sonoran Desert and descend from the ancient Hohokam culture. Carlo Gentile's 1870 photograph preserves gestures and presences of members of this community and their collective memory. In 1898, the camera records Hakasnaka, the Little Chief, a notable figure among the Arapaho. The portrait, direct and unposed, opens a window onto the life of this community in transition. In it, we see not just a face, but signs of identity and practices that carried through the turn of the 20th century. In 1870, a photograph shows the war chief's lodge in a Shoshone village in Wyoming. The shelter, both home and decision center, reveals how the leader organized collective life. By framing the village and its rhythms, the image offers a straight-up look at the culture and practices of this people. Dated 1906, this photograph captures members of the Caddo Nation and opens a window onto their lives. Originating from areas that today include Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, they stood out for their agriculture. Cautious around outsiders, they preserved practices and bonds that spanned entire generations. In 1908, Roland Reed photographed the Moose Call. In the scene, at dusk, an Ojibwe man rests in a canoe on a calm lake. He brings a hide or bark call to his mouth, blowing to make a sound. The gesture, part of ancestral knowledge, suggests a technique used in hunting or signaling, joining silence, water, and tradition. The ground we walk on holds a wealth of meaning that goes beyond usual understanding. It is inherently sacred. Every fragment, every grain of sand, is infused with the life spirit of those who came before us. Chief Plenty Coups of the Crow tribe. In the early 20th century, Iron White Man joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, a traveling phenomenon of the time. On stage, his presence blended spectacle with demonstrations of skill, giving the public a window into indigenous traditions while engaging with the rising entertainment industry. Before we continue, go ahead and click subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, YouTube understands this content matters and shares it with more people. In 1901, Fred E. Miller took the photograph Sisters, part of his effort to document the lives of Native peoples. In it, we see Whistler and Hits the One Who Rides the Gray Horse, photographed on the Crow, Apsalook Reservation, in a scene that links memory, territory, and presence. The image echoes family histories and resilience. Long Wolf, an Oglala chief known as Shunkmanitu Hanska, faded from collective memory for nearly a century. In 1997, news reports rekindled his story. He had died in 1892 in London while taking part in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and only then did his legacy begin circulating again. The 1926 photo shows Bear Bull, a Siksika elder of the Blackfoot people in northern Canada. He appears with a carefully made braid across his forehead. This detail isn't just ornament. It reveals his role as keeper of a sacred object in the medicine pipe tradition, a spiritual legacy preserved and passed down through generations. The image records an Arapaho man in 1872. More than a portrait, it's a doorway into the path of this native people, which spans territories and eras. Their presence shaped chapters of the United States and continues to echo in traditions, alliances, and knowledge that broaden indigenous diversity in North America. Awe-Ayu, known as Pretty Flower, was a prominent Seneca woman in 1908. Her people, speakers of Iroquoian languages, hold a deep heritage. Traditionally, the Seneca settled south of Lake Ontario, one of North America's 5 Great Lakes, from where they spread stories and ways of life. Originating in the Great Basin, the Bannock occupied for centuries areas in southeastern Oregon and southern Idaho. From generation to generation, they shaped ways of life in dialogue with rivers, plains, and seasons. They learned to read the land, adjust routes and livelihoods, keeping alive their relationship with the earth and collective memory. Sianina Redfeather Blackstone, born in Eufaula, Oklahoma, brought together music and public action to uplift the Muskogee Nation. As a singer and performer, she took her voice to stages and communities. As an activist, she opened paths and alliances. Her journey marked her people's memory and influenced Native culture in the United States. Lucy Thompson, a Yurok leader in Northern California, made her people's voice visible. Born in the region, she grew up among tribal rituals and stories and mastered English. With that, she became a pioneer in writing down Yurok memory and customs, preserving knowledge and connecting traditions to the outside world. In 1953, at the peak of her career, Marilyn Monroe passed through Vancouver, Canada. There, she met Chief Joe Mathias, leader of the Capilano Band. The meeting between the Hollywood star and the indigenous leader became a symbolic milestone, bringing worlds closer and expanding cultural dialogue. On that visit, it highlighted the power of unlikely encounters. The photograph Sioux Urchins, Boy and Girl marks L.A. Huffman's first steps after arriving at Fort Keogh in eastern Montana. Dated 1880, it was taken in a studio and shows 2 Sioux children, possibly siblings, revealing the author's early look at indigenous life in that setting, and his first visual records. Among Native peoples, there was a clear rule: avoid crossbreeding among relatives to keep dogs strong. So when it came time to form new litters, they sought partners from other tribes. This constant exchange of lineages explains the variety of types shown in historical records. The photograph, Gertrude Three Finger Cheyenne, is part of the legacy of William E. Irwin, 1871–1935. Between 1891 and the early 20th century, the photographer turned his lens to the daily life and traditions of Native peoples in North America. creating an ongoing record that links portrait, memory, and historical testimony. Brenda Shad, with Choctaw and Cherokee roots, built a solid career in international fashion. Her path took her from runways to editorials, with frequent appearances on the covers of major magazines. By uniting her heritage and striking presence, she became a reference and expanded her visibility in the market. Chief Dan George led the Tsleil-Waututh Nation in British Columbia from 1951 to 1963. Beyond the responsibilities of leadership, he published works as an author and poet, and at 60 he surprised everyone. He started an acting career, taking a late step that would earn him public recognition in film and TV. In the mid-1930s, at a train station, a snapshot freezes a scene. An indigenous woman and her son wait for the next departure. We don't know their names, destination, or origin. Even so, the framing suggests routines, bonds, and the quiet of travel. A brief portrait that endures over time and stirs questions. Originating in the Great Basin in the western U.S., the Shoshone shaped their history on the move. Over time, they pushed north and east, following hunting and trading routes, and came to occupy areas that today correspond to Idaho and Wyoming. In doing so, they expanded ties, territories, and ways of living. We've reached the end of our video. Subscribe to our channel and leave a comment if you like the content. See you next time.